Welcome to the Courage to Live podcast. My name is Josh Bitsko. I'm a retired police captain with 24 years of experience. Currently, I travel the country and I teach people about courage, resilience, and leadership. Joined by my co-host and wife, Jenna.
Hi.
And in today's podcast, we're going to talk about the anatomy of a critical incident, like from before the incident to long after. Kind of try and break that down as something I teach about. So, but before there, if you happen to notice both of our voices are kind of raspy, is we had a great Thanksgiving in Hawaii. We ate fresh fish, and then we both caught a cold on the way home.
Yeah. My eyes feel like they're bleeding.
Yeah. And my voice, feel like I'm losing it, and I cough every, 35 seconds. Mm-hmm. So, it makes sleeping a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I made a very important decision on this trip. And that decision was that my midlife crisis is now over. So those that watch on YouTube, you'll notice that the bangs are no more.
The bangs are no more? You got rid of the bangs?
Yeah. It's like, men that have to buy like a Corvette or whatever. Mm-hmm. This is kind of that.
You didn't cut your own bangs, but you had a professional do it. And now you got rid of them.
Yes. And I did the same thing when I was pregnant. I chopped my hair off and then I instantly regretted it. And I don't know, there's a saying, they say out there, you should just never cut your bangs, especially when you're feeling emotional. And my whole year turning 40 was emotional, and I should have heeded that advice.
Yeah, no.
Not that anyone cares, but I am now free from my midlife crisis.
Oh, yeah, no more?
Yep, it's gone.
Okay. We'll see.
Yeah.
So I think a big part of the business and what I teach about really it revolves around critical incidents. I mean, the name of the class is Police Resiliency and Critical Incident Mindset.
That you teach, yes.
Yes, that I teach. And I really wanted to create a blueprint or the right mindset for officers, but really it translates to anybody. Mm-hmm. So before we get into it, I want to define and talk about what a critical incident is.
Mm-hmm. Right? We've talked about it a couple of times, but in previous podcasts, but we've talked about specific critical incidents that you were involved in.
Yeah.
Right.
So in policing or in life, critical incidents are those low frequency, high liability, high danger events. And low frequency, depending on your job, if let's say you're a police, like a canine handler, you're going to critical incidents almost every night, right? You're going to the hottest calls, or you're in SWAT or something like that. But even a police officer is going to have a lot of critical incidents. But then still in life, what I would say is something that is a critical incident is something that, again, doesn't happen a lot, causes a lot of stress, and you have a lot to lose, right? Whether it's your life in policing or in business, maybe, losing a bunch of big customers or a lot of money or business going under, depending on how you respond to this situation. So I think with that, definition, how do you prepare for something, especially when it is low frequency? I talk about active shooters, right? And it's an easy one to talk about because there's so much on the line when there's an active shooter in a public place for anybody that, security, police officers, anybody that could respond. And it really does epitomize that critical incident. But if you think about it, true active shooters, and what I mean by that is somebody going through a crowded place, randomly shooting people until they're stopped by police, stopped by a brave citizen. And truly on average, there's about 35 a year. So if you think about that statistically, I mean, how many people are going to be involved in those? But we really have to prepare for them. We really have to train and be ready because it's such high liability, high danger. There's a lot on the line. So I think it really starts before the critical incident ever happens is making sure you train. And you train whatever your job is to be an expert in your craft. Because when the stress hits, that's not the time to be figuring out what you have to do.
Which I feel like a lot of people in leadership positions make that mistake in particular. They don't do a lot of prep work for handling a crisis. Mm-hmm. They kind of wait till they're in it and figure it out or try or fail.
Well, yeah, I did. I promoted to sergeant and hadn't even been to sergeant school yet. Was on graveyard, had my first barricade. Now I had been on a bunch as an officer, but it's different when you're in charge of it. And for those who don't know, a barricade is somebody in a house that committed a felony crime or is suicidal, and you trying to get him out and you can't. And it's a very dangerous situation for a police officer. So as a sergeant, I get there and I'm having to be the incident commander and run it. And I really hadn't had any training on it. And I hated that feeling. Like I think kind of knew what to do, but I really, putting it into execution, especially when all eyes are on you as a sergeant. So that was a learning experience for me, but not as much a learning experience for how to handle a barricade, more for I need to prepare for these types of incidents. Like I need to be ready for anything that may happen and train for them. Because just because you're great at being a, let's say, an officer, an amazing police officer, amazing detective, doesn't mean you're going to be a great sergeant because it's a different skill set. So you have to learn about what to do there. And so the first part of critical incidents is, like I said, being an expert in your craft, knowing what you need to do.
Well, and that takes, when you're an expert in something, it takes the stress in decision making out. And I don't mean like you won't feel any stress, because of course you will, but you'll already know what to do. So you're able to like make those decisions automatically.
Mm-hmm. And that leads into the next part is so the before, the training, preparing, and then it's the notification of. And however you learn that this critical incident is happening, whether, like I said, you're a first responder and you hear it on the radio, whether you're, at work or business and someone calls you, hey, this is going on, someone comes into your office. And so that's when that first, a couple things happen when you get notified. Like, this is something big in your life that's about to happen. In policing, you get a call, it's a shooting, it's an active shooter, it's something going on where you're going to have to respond and you're going to have to take action. And, the first thing is you're trying to process what's going on, right? You have a lot of information coming into you at once and you have to process and work out what even is going on. What am I going to have to do when I get there? What's my role going to be? How do I resolve this? And I think this can be overwhelming for a lot of people. And I know at times it was for me. It's like, you get told about something, it's big, it's happening, you're going to have to go and respond and, take action. And that can become overwhelming. But just like, I've talked in my class, I've talked about in other podcasts, is breaking it up into small pieces, taking that time between the notification and when you have to take action. And we call it crisis rehearsal as part of that. But as much information as you have and know what you're going to be doing, think about what's going to happen, what you're going to have to do when you get there. Like, I'll take that barricade for example. I know that I'm going to have to get there. I know I'm going to have to show up, make sure it's contained, make sure I have officers on all sides of the house. So someone's not going to get out and be dangerous to the community or a danger to the community. Set up an incident command post, try and have somebody establish communications, start notifications up my chain, like all of these things, because I did the first step and I, know what I need to do. Now I can start in my head preparing myself for, what I have to do when I arrive. So I'm running it through in my head, crisis rehearsing, going through each part of it. And again, this is applicable for so many things in life. Now, sometimes you don't have a lot of time. It's like, I equate it to the barricade or an active shooter that you're going to, or even as a cop, you walk up on a car stop and a gun comes out of the car and you just have to react. You don't have as much. It's still a critical incident, just a different type. So what I'm kind of focusing on is when you have to do something, how do you walk through it? How do you get there? How do you have success? And so taking that time between getting notification and having to take action to prepare in your head, to plan, to make sure okay, these are the steps I have to do, and even an understanding of why, right? Like, the priority is life safety of everybody around, right? So I'm going to prioritize the steps for doing that first. Then I'm going to worry about notifying up the chain and getting resources and all of that. So, that's really, now you shift from the training, which is the preparation, to the rehearsal when you're en route. And then the last step is going to be like arriving. Like, now that I'm there, how do I put into action everything? And this is through each part of this, what I can tell you from personal experience and working with, psychologists and police psychologists is a lot of things are happening to your body at this point too. Your body floods with cortisol and adrenaline, and your heart rate spikes, and maybe you're starting to like your handshake. And that isn't just when you're standing there in danger. I can tell you there were times as a new sergeant, I had my cops in a vehicle pursuit, and I'm sitting there with the radio, like knowing I'm going to have to make decisions whether to shut it down, ask questions. And I was nervous, you know, driving there or sitting in my car office or like, so, you don't have to be on scene to feel these things in your body that are going to happen.
And I felt that as a manager. If I knew, there was a problem with a report that one of my analysts had done, or um, somebody was questioning the statistics or the numbers, and I had to explain it, I felt those same emotions. It's scary. It's scary to have to answer questions that it they may not like the answer to, right?
Mhm.
Or so I think, yeah, on civilian, normal, everyday life, you feel those same emotions when, there's a report that is wrong, or somebody doesn't understand it, or you have a patient and maybe you put notes in wrong, or you didn't treat them correctly, or whatever it may be. You can still feel those exact same feelings.
Yeah. And then you can still put into place what we're talking about today.
Yep, absolutely.
Because there are ways to mitigate your physiological responses to fear. And we talk about fear, and that's what it is, right? It's fear and anxiety that you're going to feel when you have um, those hormones rush, the cortisol, the adrenaline. Your body is preparing itself for that critical incident, and so you have to try and take control. And now in the class, I go very much in depth in all the ways that you can do this. But the biggest part is, and I know we talked about this in the fear episode, is really just controlling your breathing, because that's one of those shallow, rapid breaths are one of the first things that happens, and you're just kind of taking your body back from that emotion, and really just doing that in those moments can help clear your mind to make the decisions that you need to make.
Well, and how do you think that? Well, because obviously all of those feelings at once are overwhelming. So, how do you think, besides breathing, that you can help that overwhelm? And then, how can you help somebody else that maybe in that scenario with you that you can tell is feeling that overwhelm? What are some other steps?
So, like internally, when you're feeling overwhelmed, right? Obviously, we talk about the breathing, the breath work, um, the crisis rehearsal, and preparing yourself, knowing that you're trained. And it's oftentimes that overwhelmed feeling. There's fear, but then there's also fear of failure and like anxiety. And so that really is combated by confidence. And what I tell people in those moments when you're feeling this internally is it's just a collection of small steps. When you think about the big thing that you have to do and the consequences if you fail, like you were talking about the numbers are wrong or reports. Well, your fear and anxiety is really rooted in the consequences, that whether that, affects your reputation at work, or, messing something up and having an impact on the community or any of those things. So, the controlling your body is the one thing, right? But then also breaking it up into small things. Like, what is the first thing? Like I talked about at that barricade, the first thing I need to do is containment. What does that involve? I need to make sure I have a comm on all four sides of the house that can see if somebody were to come out.
Well, you're calling on your expertise, which is exactly what you just talked about. Becoming an expert in your field. We've talked about that on other podcasts before. Being so well versed in what you need to do and your knowledge of that field that you're able to recall that training gives you that confidence. And we've talked about that before, but
yeah. And so, I'm breaking it up into small things that are more manageable mentally. The big things are overwhelming. The small things less so. So you're controlling the body with the breath work. And like I said, there's other things that I teach in the class. And then, mentally I'm breaking this up into a small thing. I'm just going to keep pushing forward, keeping forward momentum, because it may feel like you're not. doing enough fast enough, but as long as you're moving forward, you are. And that's how, like, internal, that's what I've always done to push forward, right? It's like breaking things up into small steps and getting those steps done. And then you turn around and, okay, yeah, we're through it. We're through the whole incident. You might be exhausted. Like I remember after the UNLV shooting that I know that we talked about on another podcast, but I know when that was over, like I just felt it was 8 or 9 hours, 10 hours of work, just small steps pushing forward. And then I remember just feeling like exhausted. Like that's when it hit me. When you have the adrenaline, you have to keep pushing forward and going. It's one thing, but then afterwards, then it's like, that's what's difficult. And it's where it really impacts you. But, and then knowing, so you keep that forward momentum, doing small things and it turns into the big thing and you got that big thing done.
Do you feel like bias, assumptions, those things can sneak in to that process and impact your decision making?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's, I'll give a perfect example. In in K9, we always talk about suspect psychology. When, a big part of what you do in K9 is you're searching for somebody that ran from the police. Generally people hide when they run, especially if they're somewhere they don't know. But again, I'm making an assumption there, right? And so we would always know, okay, most suspects end up running to the right. When they're running for the police, they run to the right. And if they run to the right, they run a lot longer. They run to the left because most people are left-handed. They generally hide.
Most people are left-handed?
Or, I mean, sorry, most people are right-handed.
Like,
so if they run to the left, which they tend to panic more and hide. And so in K9, you always want to be, okay, I'm going to take to the left and I'm going to take the first area. Or I'm going to take the right and I'm going to take towards the end of the perimeter where they're most likely to hide. Because you're making an assumption based on suspect psychology and experience. And I can tell you how many times, like, I'm taking a low, as a sergeant, I'd show up and I'd let my guys take the high priority spots. I found a lot of people, hiding
to the right immediately,
or to the left in a far distance, like just anywhere else. Like we make assumptions and it impacts our decision making. Like this is where I'm going to search, but ultimately it's not, it's not always the case. It's not even usually the case. I mean, I found a lot of people to the left immediately too, but we have these assumptions and it affects our decision making. I know that, most barricades don't end up in shootings. The shooting is going to happen at the onset and then at the end. But if I make that assumption and I get complacent, then I'm going to be in danger. I'm putting my people in danger.
So is that, I was just going to ask, so how do you prevent that? But in your opinion, is that just not becoming complacent?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, so right now, if someone waved a wand and I was back in K9 in my first perimeter, I'm going to take to the left short, just because it's also superstition. But I'm not going to be complacent. And so in that situation, complacency is not paying attention to my dog while I'm walking there and he dives in a bush and bites the suspect who's hiding not where I expected him to be. Or I'm complacent on a barricade because after the first 30 minutes, most of them end peacefully, then I'm getting complacent, not really taking cover, not doing all the steps I need to. So yeah, you fight assumptions through not becoming complacent. It's just a data point in your head. And because assumptions oftentimes are based in experience, right? Like, okay, and bias. And so I just being aware of that and not allowing it to, make you unsafe. And I think it's the same thing in any other job. You have experiences, it's going to affect your decision making. So, but if you don't stay on top of it, you could get lazy and make mistakes that you're not intending to because you're like, oh, it usually doesn't matter. So
we've talked about before and during critical incident. So how does that translate into the after?
Yeah. So, and this is where I think, well, I can tell you, me personally did a really bad job. Is, there was either, okay, that was crazy. Let's all get beers after and we'll go, go drink and maybe talk about it and debrief, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. But what would it turn into is that alcohol being a coping method for what we just saw and not actually talking about, hey, this really bothered me. Or you just like go back to work and pretend it didn't happen. And not all critical incidents are like traumatic. I mean, some of them are exciting, and then it doesn't really have like I had several critical incidents that I don't even really think about, and then I have some that were those the big moments that stick with you. And I think so. If you do not work on processing through what happened, there's a couple things. First off, is I'm talking about immediately afterwards, right? If you don't take a time to, maybe take a breath, take a pause, take a day off from work to try and like process through what happened, at least starting that. It's not, you're not going to just process through and then I'm okay. But at least being aware that, hey, what I just went through could be traumatic. It was just really stressful. Maybe you just need a bit of self-care and go for a hike through the mountains or whatever it is that fills your soul. Um, but I think a lot of people don't do that because you don't want to confront. I just have to go back to work. Life is busy and I'm going to keep pushing forward.
Yeah. And it's exactly what you talked about on your blog this week with avoidance, right? So it's easier to avoid those hard emotions than to confront them, because confronting them means you have to acknowledge that they exist, right?
Yeah, it's easier in the short term.
Well,
And
yes.
that's, you're right. Like it's easy in that moment because I'm just avoiding it. But then a small problem can be a big problem later if you don't deal with it. And that's true to so many different things in life, hard conversations, but really in processing through difficult things, we need to be more proactive, especially in the first responder community with our mental health, with, um, you know, processing through things, with working through things. I mean, we really just do. We have to work harder to make sure that we're doing those things. Or later in life, maybe a couple months later, maybe a couple years later, maybe a couple decades later, then you have to confront it. And it's just been festering for so long. I know that was true with some of mine, right? I didn't want to deal with it. So I pushed it down and then it started coming out in very problematic ways for me.
So how do you think then leaders how can they better themselves besides what we've talked about, but before, during, and after, and so that they can be the best leader that they can be? And then I have a question about teams after that.
Okay. Well, when it comes to leaders, making sure they're there for their people, that they're not allowing, fear and anxiety to overwhelm them because of a critical incident. They also, for after the fact, the first thing is you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself. That was most leaders that I worked with that were very pro wellness of their people weren't taking care of their own wellness. They knew that they needed to, but here's the thing: people are smart and they see like, okay, you're telling us we need to do this thing, but you're not doing this thing yourself.
Inauthentic.
Yes. And so, it's like on an airplane, you have to put your own mask on before you help somebody else, right? It's the same thing. You have to make sure you're taking care of yourself and you're coming from a healthy enough place to help people. It's like the quote from my book. Everyone knows hurt people, but healed people heal people. And so you're best positioned to help people if you've been on that journey yourself. So that's step one for a leader is you need to make sure you're taking care of yourself. And then, it's just, I think we overcomplicate wellness in, first responder community, but
Every
just,
industry.
yeah, really just any industry is, we have to, all these resources, but honestly, it's just being a decent human. I know that you went through this hard thing. Yes, I'm your leader, but I want to have an authentic conversation with you about it.
Well, yeah. And I think at least too, on the civilian side of it, for me, if one of my people messed up and it was a big mistake, I I always took accountability and said it was me, because at the end of the day, it was my oversight. I should have trained them well enough. One, two, I should have caught it. So for me, it was, as a leader, not throwing people under the bus, not saying, oh yeah, so and so, she really messed that up, or I can't believe she did that, or I've trained her better than that. Never, not one time. And I watched other managers do it. I watched my boss do it all the time. Meaning watched them throw people under the bus all the time, and they had thrown me under the bus before, and I knew how bad that felt.
Mhm.
And I never wanted to do that to any of my people. And so I didn't, because at the end of the day, it was me as a leader. Like any single mistake that my people made boiled down to me. And so I think that is super important too, is one, having your people trained as well as they possibly can be. They're not up to the standards, either helping them so that they are, or putting a performance plan or whatever it is in place. And if they can't do the job, then, moving them or whatever you need to do. And then three, when mistakes do happen, one, they know that you're going to have their back. And two, you taking accountability for it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think you touched on so much right there. Specifically, right now, we're focusing on wellness and everyone just talks about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much more to mental health than we have access to clinicians talk about the stuff you've seen. It's that kind of leadership. It's making sure someone feels safe at work to make mistakes and then learn from it. You got to hold them accountable if you got to hold them accountable, but you can do it in a way. Like I was always the same way. I remember sitting in meetings as a captain with the community, like, hey, if there's a crime problem in this community, it is because of me. I truly believe that, because I need to be able to respond as a captain, make sure we have the resources where they need to be, and I need you guys to communicate with me as community leaders. So I truly believe that. And then if something great happened, that was my cops did a good job. And
yeah, absolutely.
it's like, and so because you build that then reputation because of your character, you build that. Then when you have that conversation with your people about how they're doing mental health, there's value there. It's not you're a crappy leader who's throwing people under the bus, but now because wellness is important. Hey, how's your wellness? Like, it's just not coming from a place of, I think you said, authenticity. So I think that's a big part of it. And so there's so many different aspects from leadership that you can take care of your people and understand that. But this is the hard part. This is the burden of leadership. You really have to be firing on all cylinders when it comes to that. Time off is important. So how do you schedule it so people can take time off and take the breaks they need? I care about your wellness, but I'm not going to give you time off and you're not getting lunch breaks, and because we're just so busy. Okay, well then you don't care about my wellness. That's how people take that, right?
Well, yeah. And I mean, just an example of that, we've seen with the class is literally called Police Resiliency and Critical Incident Mindset. And we've seen agencies that have provided that training for as many people as they could. And we've seen agencies that have just said, here's a training, but we're not going to give you the time off to go.
Yeah.
Which is actually wild to me. Here's a training for your wellness, but we're not going to give you I'm not going to give you the time to go. You have to do it on your own time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it. That means, do you really care about the wellness, or are you just putting on a show that you care about wellness? And, there's both of those things are true. Both of those things are happening right now in the industry.
And it happens in other industries too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you go talk to someone working in a hospital and see how much time off they get and how many hours they work and how many breaks they're getting. Or, I mean, that could be repeated in almost any industry. That's the thing about leadership. And I think sometimes it's lost is, oh, this is a great, this class or this book on leadership.
Look what I found for you.
Yeah. But it's by someone in the military. So that's not going to apply to me, but leadership is leadership.
Yeah.
And the tenets of them are like, they're the same. So being mindful of that, when you're trying to, back after a critical incident, as a leader, you have to make sure your people are getting what they need and it helps the person, which first and foremost also helps the agency, because, you're not going to have people with these problems later on that now, there's a cost associated with it. There's manpower issues and all of that because you're not addressing it early on. And if it's you that was through it, then you also need to be proactive. You need to be proactive in your own mental health. We'd spend time in the gym and stay in shape and do all of that, but our mental health, we're like, I'm just going to shove that down and we're not going to talk about it. So that same proactive mindset that we have for our physical health, we need to also have for our mental health.
So, last question then. How, as a team, can you spot and support each other during a critical incident?
Yeah, so this is where I, even in my class, I'll get on my soapbox, right? Is if you're on a team and you're waiting for your leadership to come in and fix your mental health, it's really just you're going to be waiting a long time because sometimes there's leadership that'll come in and do that. But here's the thing: we know our peers. Again, regardless of the industry, you're spending 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day with somebody. You know them probably at least their emotional state as well as family. And so if you know somebody is struggling, like it used to bug me. I'd take these, wellness classes and they talk for days about the problem and the stigma of getting mental health. And then when it goes to solving the problem, I say, and just so make sure you tell people if they're struggling, reach out. And in my experience, most of the people that are going to reach out, we're going to do it either way. A flyer on the bulletin board by the kitchen of the office is not going to get somebody to reach out. So that's where we really, and I've done a small podcast on this, but the importance of reaching in. Like, okay, I know you're struggling and you've been through, something hard, or I'm just sensing you're off. I need to have that courage to have that conversation with you. Not a check the box, go to the boss, go to peer support or whatever it is, but hey, are you doing okay? Like what's going on in your life? Learning how to ask open-ended questions, right? And really having those conversations to get people help.
Well, and I think too, there has to be a level of trust there, right? You, if, I mean, yes, absolutely on the police side, but even on the civilian side too, when I was working as an analyst with my peers, there had to be a level of trust. We all had to um, have each other's back to a degree, or or all of us were going to be on fire. And if two of us didn't like each other, we either had to sit down and figure it out. And if there was no figuring it out, there was a huge divide. And that did happen, obviously. I mean, most analysts are women. And so there's going to be a lot of cattiness and people that don't like each other. But at the end of the day, we either had to figure it out and agree upon, and by we, I'm speaking collectively, like we had to agree that when we get called in that office to get yelled at, we're going to have each other's backs. We don't have to like each other out here, but in there, we're going to have each other's backs, or, we don't. And that's a whole other problem. But I think, at least on the civilian side, having a certain level of trust with the people that you work with and a willingness, obviously they have to be hard workers. They have to be somebody with values, but having that level of trust to be able to have each other's backs and, checking each other's work and asking questions and asking for help so that everybody didn't get set on fire when something went wrong, or we all did. And it wasn't just one person.
Well, yeah. And I think that is an important part about team, right? Is you are a team, and for good or bad, for, whatever's going on, like you need to support each other. You don't have to like each other. You just have to tolerate each other to get the mission done and keep moving forward. And sometimes that mission is making sure everybody is taking care of themselves.
Everyone comes out alive.
Comes out alive, whether that's getting yelled at in a board meeting or a tactical operation, right? So, I think there is a progression to critical incidents. It's the preparation, it's the mental, emotional regulation, it's the decision making in the moment, breaking it up into small things, and then it's the taking care of yourself after. And again, big or small, doesn't have to be a large active shooter incident to apply this. It can be something small, it can be something at work. If you apply the same things, then you're going to find success. It doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes. And mistakes, so that's the last part about after a critical incident, reviewing it and learning from the mistakes that you made to get better, and then helping other people with that knowledge. Right. And that's what our class is about. That's what we teach, is based on, the experiences I've been through, what worked, what didn't work, what worked internally, what worked with my mental health, what didn't. and providing people with that blueprint.
Yep, absolutely.
So, well, I think that wraps up our podcast today. If you like some of the things that I talked about, there's more in my book, The Courage to Live. It's available on Amazon. And, if you liked our podcast, please share it with a friend, subscribe, leave a review. And we appreciate you spending time with us today.